Irosha, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Aydin. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, it's really good to do this. I thought I would tell the audience how you and I met because I think it relates to the podcast, right? So, maybe in a normal life we would have, or maybe like 5 years ago, we would have met up at a conference. You would have been, telling me about your background, how you're building cool stuff, and I would have asked, and that's how we would have gotten acquainted. But the way we actually got acquainted was through this AI agent called Bordy, and Bordy is this networking AI agent that you can call and talk to, and you tell it about yourself, and then you tell it about who you would want to meet, and then it just goes off in the background and figures out who should meet, and then introduces you by email, just like this professional networking bot. And that was pretty cool. Have you met a lot of people using Bordy?
I think it's great to meet you like this as well, Edna, because I've heard of Fellow and then I've used Fellow as well, right? So then, and I never really imagined a meeting with the founder, right? So then, but when Bodhi did the introduction, so I was immediately intrigued, right? So then I wanted to speak with you and then see how you guys are really doing it, right? So yes, I met very interesting people just like you, right? Because I think Bodhi has sort of understood the fact that I would like to meet other fellow founders, right, who are building the same space, right? So it's been great, Eden. So it's actually a very useful product.
Yeah, so we're gonna link to Bordy in the in the show notes as well for people to check out. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. You can still tell that you're talking to an AI agent, but if you kind of squint and, once you get into the conversation, you kind of forget. And it's amazing. I think the first time I was talking to Bordy, I was talking to it for a good 15 minutes. And yeah, and it's incredible. I've met a lot of great people on this, and so that's something that everybody can sign up to and check out. But let's talk a little bit about how did you get involved in the AI space? Maybe tell us a little bit about your background, what you're up to these days, leading up to working with AI.
Yeah. So to tell you about my story, Aiden, right? So I've been in I would say sort of all things in tech since of my childhood. I've been building small, different things, right? Some in the fitness space, right? Some in the social media space, right? All I would say successfully failed startups, I would say, not really things that really took off as per se, right? But say the main, so since the initial projects really didn't take off, right? I built a software consultancy company, right? Initially called Creative Hub Global, right? Which I started from my garage, and then I actually grew it to a team of 50, right? So then that's helping other founders to build bring their MVPs to life and things like that, right? So
it was like a software development agency.
Exactly, yeah. So that's essentially what I did before, right? So then since Creative Hub was really taking off, with that I was trying out different other ideas as well, right? Trying to build different other things and whatnot, but then really realized it's not really possible to bring something truly innovative to life without really going all into it, right? So that's I would say something that I even learned from one of Sam Altman's conversations as well, right? So that you got to really commit 100% to something, right?
Yeah. By the way, I agree with that. I remember I also had some, call it successful failure startups. And that's literally the exact conclusion I drew. I was, working full time and on nights and weekends trying to figure stuff out and try different products. But that was literally my conclusion. I'm like, all of these are failing. The reason they're failing is I'm not all in. So yeah, I think we both drew the same conclusion.
100%, Aiden, right? So then that realization I really got, right? So then that's when I came into the conclusion, right, on the fact that I got to go really all in, right? And then I was I was in Sri Lanka back in there because I'm originally from Sri Lanka, right? So then, and the whole AI wave was really happening as well, right? So that's when I realized, okay, I got to commit to a product, right? And then at the same time, I got to move to the Silicon Valley, right, to really understand, like, what is happening over here, right? So because I traveled here a few times, I taking part in different conferences and things like that, right? But I really fell in love with the city as well, right? So then the whole vibe, right, the innovation drive and everything, right? So that's when, like, I took the decision, right? So then I got to really go all in on Marketrix, right? Because there is a, like, really a big problem that I can solve, right, within this space. I got to go all in at it, right? And I need to be at the right place also, right? Because like, being in Sri Lanka and then trying to understand a sort of, like, what's happening with AI right now with the landscape and everything, it was very tough, right? So then that's when, like, I would say I came here, right? And then, like, I understood this problem, mainly speaking, right? So fundamentally speaking, the problem, like, I mean, the main insight that I drew to build Marketrix is, right? So I was trying to connect my Bank of America account to QuickBooks, right? So the connection was not really going through for some odd reason, right? So then probably due to the way how my company has been configured or whatnot, right? So I looked at the AI chatbot, right? It simply gave me like a couple of, like, do 1, 2, and 3 kind of a thing. It didn't resolve my problem. Then, like, I reached out to the live chat, right? So then some agent joined in. He asked me to like, download like a specific software, and then got into like the screen sharing session. So 3 hours in, right, sort of the person trying to, like, pinpoint me to different places, right, guiding me to fix this problem. So after even 3 hours, my problem was only partially resolved, right? So this is when I really understood there is a fundamental problem, right, with regards of how the software support is really being provided, right? Because fundamentally speaking, the AI chatbots that's there right now within SaaS products, either they understand the documentation inside out, but not really the product, right? So hence why, like, we are really building this agentic spatial understanding model that, like, mimics the behavior of like a real user, right? And builds that understanding so that, like, it's able to provide visual on-screen visual guidance. So that's, like, glimpse of my story.
Yeah, so super interesting. And then I'll ask you to show us how this works. But this is what I love about entrepreneurs, right? So I think a lot of people would just go try and get chat support, trying to solve their problem on Bank of America's login portal there. And when it doesn't work, you just get frustrated. You talk to customer support. Eventually, you solve it a few hours later, and then you just move on, right? But you took that experience as an source of inspiration, and so you're building this product, which is really cool, and I'm excited for everyone to see it. But effectively, what it does is, rather than talking to a chatbot and for the chatbot to just give you instructions on what you should do, it actually shows you. It's almost like having a human sitting right next to you, walking you through what you should click on next. And I think it's really awesome. And I'm excited to go there. So, but before we do, I wanted to start with maybe just kind of getting a sense. So you've built a company in the past, right? So you built this agency to 50 people. You've done multiple startups. And now you're building a startup which is powered by AI, but this is the first time that you're building a company in the kind of, call it like, post AI world. So what's different about your company, given that you now have AI tools and AI at your disposal? So how would you say AI has impacted your company and the way that you're building the company?
If you are to really think it from a company standpoint, Aiden, right, it's really helped us to think fundamentally, like, how this, because I think it's really a very interesting time and space that we are living right now, where we are able to really reimagine whatever the things that's, like, whatever the functions that's actually happening right now, right? So our core focus is with regards of support, like, how software support is really being provided, right? And we've taken this as an opportunity, right? How can fundamentally software support? Because, like, if the software alone, right, so then given that, like, software is rolling out always new features, right, and then, like, always having all these changes, right, if the software is able to support on its own, then that solves a lot of problems, right? So then, I mean, fundamentally, I would say, like, it it's helped us and it's given us the power also, right, to think from a very fundamental standpoint, how can this sector be changed altogether, right? So then that's, I would say, wonderful, right? And that's a great ability that, like, all the new entrepreneurs are actually having right now, right? Which, like, didn't really used to be the case before, right? So I mean, that I would say, like, is from more from a company, from product standpoint, right?
So what you're saying is that because there are these new building blocks of AI, it doesn't matter what the space is, you can almost reimagine any industry, any space, anything that, like, any companies that existed for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, that company is disruptable. Like, everything is disruptable. So it's almost like every single company you can reimagine. And you happen to be doing that in customer support, but it can happen anywhere.
Exactly. I mean, right. Say now, if you really think about it, right, I'm sure it's the case with everyone as well, right? So then, at least, like, 80 to 90% of my search queries on Google has been taken up by ChatGPT or Grok or Perplexity, right? So then now, like, say, which, like, we couldn't have even thought about, like, a couple of years before, right? So, I mean, that's just with regards of search is concerned, right? And, like, I think the same ability is there right now, and then the same power is there right now for entrepreneurs to really rethink, right, whatever the function, whatever the industry, right, up to, like, how it can fundamentally be different, right? Because it's a as you also correctly said, it's a whole new world that we are stepping into right now, right?
Yeah, totally. So what kind of things, like, what's one thing that your company is doing differently using AI?
Operationally, if you look at it, right, so then of course we try to use, like, all the standard, like, tools that's there, right, so that, like, we are able to I mean, us having a lean team structure and lean operational structure, right? So then it's very important the fact that, like, we really move fast, right? So from a product standpoint, right, how are we able to like, ship faster, right? So then, like, essentially, like, using tools like, say, GitHub's Copilot, like, that's been great, right? So then, like, how it allows us to sort of auto complete the code, right, or debug faster and all these things like that, right? Then, like, when it comes to more from a sales and marketing standpoint, right? So then how can we run campaigns, like, much faster, right, as opposed to, like, previously when we had to put together, like, a couple of people, right, and then, like, get different things done, right? But right now it's given us the ability to really move faster, right, and then, like, push things, like, because that's what, like, an early stage startup should essentially should be as well, because the main thing what we have is the speed, as opposed to, like, the large players, right?
Yeah. So what's an example? I mean, I love GitHub's Copilot. We use it too. We also use Cursor internally, which is kind of blowing up too. What about, like, what are you guys doing in sales and marketing to move faster? Is there, like, a example anecdote that you can talk about?
I'd like to show something very simple, right? Which I found to be very useful since of recent, right? So I took part in NVIDIA GTC, like, last week, which was great, right? And then, like, Jensen gave, like, put up this, like, quantum day, right? Quantum computing day for the first time, right? Where he sort of invited all the quantum computing CEOs, right? And then hosted, like, a conversation, right? So I wanted to do a post, right? And then I was able to really get, like, a close shot of Jensen, like, very closely as well, so which was great, right? So then I want to do a, like, LinkedIn post on that, right? So then, but I wanted to make sure that there is something that's, like, very engaging, right? That gives a good idea about the landscape of quantum computing, and then also, like, some details regarding, like, say, the companies that were part of this forum as well, right? So if I'm to share my screen.
Yeah. So before you share your screen, just kind of paint the picture here. So what's interesting here is, like, you went to this conference and you took some pictures, you had some insights, and you want to write, like, a solid LinkedIn post about it. Uh, Pre AI, you would have, you would have maybe thought about it. Maybe you'd have to set out, aside, like, an hour, or so, maybe more, to really put this together, to post it. And, you're a busy CEO, you're focused on the product. I think you also still write software, like, you do all these things. It doesn't really make the priority list. So a lot of times you have these good intentions and you want to do these things, but you don't do them. So I think like it's not necessarily only about speed here in being able to do this fast. It's a matter of like whether it gets done or not, to some extent. And so yeah, I'd love to see like, yeah, how did you put this LinkedIn post together using AI?
That's a very interesting point, actually. And before I dive into that, because previously these sorts of things might have not been done altogether, right? Because the like the time to do something like that, it's a lot more, right? So I mean that's a very very good point that you brought up, right? So if I'm to share my screen, are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, what I wanted to do was like, okay, I mentioned, okay, there was this quantum computing day, right? And then I took up some notes, right, from
So
this.
what is this? Are you, is this, this looks like it's Grok, right?
It is Grok 3, actually. That's what I'm using over here, right? So then, I mean, I put up the same prompt on ChatGPT as well, but I found that Grok's, because I try, I mean, for these sorts of specific ones that require some sort of like a research element to it, I found Grok to be performing better, right? Again,
why do you say, why do you think Grok performs better? And by the way, for everybody who doesn't know, this is grok.com with a Grok with a K. And this is Elon's, I guess, like competitor to ChatGPT. I think they put up a 100,000 node GPU cluster to make this work. And it became like the #1 app in the App Store for at least a few days. And so I like it too, but maybe explain to everybody why you think this performs better.
So I mean, what I've found Grok to be, because Grok has the Twitter data, right? So it also it is able to run your query against the Twitter data set, right? And then say that you want to do some sort of a say stock analysis, stock market analysis, say for a particular stock, right? So then these sorts of things are, I mean, queries are able to be run much better on Grok, because it's able to get real-time insights through the conversation that's happening on Twitter, right? So that's, I would say, the main advantage that Grok has, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's so true, because if you kind of think about it, like most things are downstream from Twitter or X, right? So before it makes it into an article, it's probably a tweet. And you went to this conference, it just happened, you just want to post about it. The only place that's going to actually have information about it is likely Twitter. And so to use Grok for something like that makes all the sense in the world.
Exactly, Aydin, right? So then now here, I mean, I simply put up the notes that I've taken, right? So then while I was listening to the conversation, right? And then what it's done is it's run through most of the, I mean, some of the websites, right, of these particular companies that were part of.
And was this like a deep research query? Like, did you use the?
I didn't run a deep research query over here, actually, Aydin, because this it's for a LinkedIn post, right? So then because of that, I did not really go into the deep research, but yes, maybe it could have performed better, right? Because it takes sometimes when you do a deep research query, it takes a couple of minutes even, right? So since I felt it is not a very complex task, I didn't go into the deep research mode, right? So but I found this to be quite
and what was your prompt? So it sounds like you wrote a bunch of notes while you were there.
Yeah.
And then you pasted those notes in, but what was the prompt that you gave it?
Prompt was, right, so then give a good factual LinkedIn post on this, that I was at GTC. No, this was an older one, right? So so at the below and improve, right? So then I initially got, right, so then now this was my flow, right? So then I wrote my own prompt, right? So then that it was the Jensen's talk with the quantum computing panel, it was good, right? And then I fed it with the specific notes that I took as while I was looking at, I was I took up as part of the watching the conversation, right? So then what it did was it went through sort of understood each of these companies, quantum computing companies that have been part of this forum, right? And then essentially it gave gave this particular post, right? So then telling about Rigetti and Quera, right? So then what they are doing with quantum computing, right? And sort of understanding similarities between the type of quantum computing that they are doing as well, right? So I mean, this essentially how this came up with the post, Aiden.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is really cool. So you
Right.
started by like getting it to pull some information together, some real-time information. You fed it with your notes. It then was able to improve the original post. And then it looks like you did a little bit more back and forth.
Yeah.
And then you posted it on LinkedIn.
Exactly. So this was the final outcome which I posted on LinkedIn, right? So then and I mean and I put up the close up shot that I was able to get with Jensen as well. And now I mean the engagements have been quite good, right? So there's been about 71 likes and then about 4,000 impressions, right? So which is decently all right, right? So because my typical post, I would say, doesn't really go up to this amount, right? So it roughly it ranges from about probably about 20 likes or so, right? So this has performed so much better, right? Compared to my general post. Yeah.
Yeah. So for all the like busy executives, right? Like there's so many things that you have insights on, and this makes it possible for you to take your insights and turn them into good quality work that you can post on. And so yeah, I mean this is super awesome. Thank you for showing that workflow to us.
Absolutely, Eden. Yeah.
So yeah, the other thing I was hoping to do a demo of, and I think again like this is really really cool, is what does it look like? Like, do you want to show us a demo of Marketrix and how that works? And what I want everybody to like really pay attention to as Irosha is showing this is that this is really like the future of, I would say, customer support, right? It's not reading an article hoping to give you an answer. It's like the software is just going to guide you to solve your problem. So yeah, maybe show it to us in action.
Exactly. Sure, Aiden. Right. So if I'm to dive into that, right. So the problem that we are trying to solve is right now, I mean, I'm taking an example of a very known product, right, which is Canva, right? So now if you look at the current context of Canva right now, so then there is this chatbot that you get on Canva itself called Ask Canva, right? So you ask from it some sort of a query. Let's say you ask from it, how can I crop an image, right? It gives you some step by some answer, right? But this is purely based on its documentation. It runs your query through its documentation and then it gives you the answer, right? So what we have done is, right, so then now we have what we are building is an agentic AI simulation based model that understands the product, right? So then now we have run agentic AI simulations on Canva and understood Canva as how a real user would be using Canva. And then basically we've built this Chrome extension which is running on top of Canva itself, right? Which you can start using on top of Canva itself, right? And then you ask from this or from our chatbot, right? Say you ask the question, show me how to crop an image, right? This essentially brings in the spotlight mode, right? And then basically it understands the user from a contextual standpoint, right? Which part of the journey is the user in right now, and then essentially guides the user in a step-by-step manner, helping the user to essentially achieve that particular task end, right? So now if I'm to dive into to the dashboard, right, of how we do this, right? So all that we require is a demo login to your application, right? So once you give us a demo login to your application, then we of course cross check it with your existing knowledge base, right? So what I mean by existing knowledge base is be it your documentation and walkthrough videos as well, right? Because we can run all the AI agentic simulations on your product, but the understanding that we may be building might be wrong, right? So hence why we really cross check between your walkthrough videos and then the documentation, right? and then we run these simulations, right? So then you are able to initiate running simulations on the product, right? And then when you dive into like a particular simulation, then you can see how our agentic AI has essentially run through your product, and then build an understanding about the product, right? So this is the understanding that we use, right, for us to basically provide this on-screen visual guidance, right, for users, right, as opposed to just providing textual guidance. So the first step is basically showing the the users, right? So then, I mean, as we call it, we have three modes, right? That's tell, show, and do, right? So then do is just coming up, right? So the tell is, I mean, very straightforward, which is what's there in standard, right? It gives sort of a textual response, right? So then show is basically where we understand this context of the user and then guide the user in a methodical way, helping them to achieve that particular task, right? Then do is of course getting things done for them, right? So this is where we are, I mean, what we are building in, right? So then the future, right, that we are building with Marketrix is essentially helping, as I mentioned before as well, helping software companies to make sure that their software essentially supports itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is super cool. So what I like about this and what's super interesting is that you basically wrote software that you give it a login to whatever your application is. So say we were using this for Fellow, we would give a username and password that Marketrix could basically use. It logs into the application. It clicks around so that it can understand what's going on in your software, and then based on that, it learns your software, and so that when the next time when a user asks a question, it can just show you around. And for people who were not watching our video on Spotify or on YouTube, that's what happened. There was like a visual guide where it's like, click here, now click here. And it's so incredible. Irosha, one of my kind of like mental models around AI and like what it can be useful for is if, for example, you had if your company had only one customer, right, and you wanted to give this customer like the best possible support ever, right? You wouldn't say, here's a long article, go read it and figure out what to do. You would say like, no, I'm gonna like fly over there, I'm gonna buy them coffee, and then I'm gonna kind of like show them where to click. But what's the next best thing? Well, I'm not going to fly over there. I'm going to show them what to click on so that they don't have to go through all this effort to go read the document and figure out what to do. And I think like that's what AI does. It makes it so that you could treat every customer like they're your only customer, make the experience so good that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do that. And so that's really cool to see you guys make that happen.
Exactly. I mean, and then when we are speaking to companies, I mean, initially the problem that we thought that we are solving is helping companies to because most of the time onboarding and then post onboarding support, right, is being provided by doing screen sharing sessions, right? So then you share the screen, and then you help the users to navigate the different functionalities and things and whatnot, right? So then, but what we realize now more and more as we are onboarding companies, that there are companies that is not able to do that even, right? The only thing that they are able to do is to give an email support, right? And if you look at say Canva, I was showing you that, right? So it's not even able to do that as well because of the scale that they are in, right? So then they are not having one user, but rather millions of users, right? They are obviously not really able to even, it's tough for them to even provide email based support, right? So but at the same time, what's the alternative, right? So the alternative is, if the alternative is only providing demo videos which the users have to go and watch them and learn on their own, or else read documentation, which is very much time consuming, right? But now say if I'm going to Canva, I want to achieve a particular task, right? I don't want to spend 10 more minutes watching a YouTube video learning how to do that to get this particular task done, right? So that's that's essentially what we are driving with Marketrix.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is when people see what AI is capable of, I think the world becomes less patient. As users, we're going to become less patient. We'll say to Google, don't send me to 10 blue links and I have to click on each one, read them to find out my answer. Just tell me what the answer is. And I think that's happening to customer support. People don't want to read anything. Just show me what to click. And so, yeah, this is great. So, Irosha, thank you for showing us these 2 use cases. I think it's incredible. So the question that you usually like to end on is, what are you most excited about over the next 12 months in the world of AI?
So the main things that I'm really excited about is now say from a from a founder standpoint, right? So then now more and more now, if you look at in the whole of Silicon Valley, and I think everywhere, what people are speaking about is how can they be the first 1% billion-dollar company, right? So I think it's really headed towards there, right? Because now we are because what people have still got the glimpse is just the sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? So then that's we are getting a specific function done, because now if you really look at the example of the LinkedIn post, right, that I was showing, right? So then it did not exactly I had to do so many prompts to get to that point, right? It was not really being my personal LinkedIn account manager, right, as per se, right, which is something that I would actually prefer to be, right, because I've already attended the event, I've already taken the notes, right? So then why can't it just be done, right? So then I think more and more this agentic AI workflows are coming up, right? So then I think we are going to be seeing a lot of agents sort of working together, right? So so I mean that's one thing that I'm super excited about, Aydin, right? So then how can we see whereas we are seeing a specific function of a particular workflow being taken up by AI, rather than that right now how can a complete workflow, right, be taken up by AI, right? And then how can sort of these different workflows be combined together to bring this vision to life of this 1% billion-dollar company. So I mean that's one thing, and then mainly the other main thing that I'm super excited to see is the because now this is one of the main things that I learned from GTC as well, right? So then that's world is now moving from agentic AI to physical AI, right? So how can the AI be given arms and legs, right? So then that's sort of the next thing, because robotics is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, right? So then, so I mean that's another thing I would say that I'm super excited to see in the coming years as well.
Yeah, love it. So, yeah, this is really great. So for everybody that wants the play-by-play on how Irosha showed us how he created that LinkedIn post, it got triple the engagement of a normal post that he would have had. If you want the play-by-play, just go to thisnewway.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll send you that. We'll also link to Marketrix if you want to learn how to power your apps to have self-serve customer support with almost like this agentic interface. We'll link to that. And yeah, Irosha, how can people find you on the internet if they want to reach out?
I mean, simply you can go into my LinkedIn, right, and then just send me a request, right, and then would love to give a personalized demo as well, right, if you're someone in the SaaS space. And of course I'm happy to share my email. My email is irosha@marketrix.ai, and please do drop us a note, drop me a note, and then happy to explore to your use case also.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks a lot, Aydin. Really appreciate it.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.